What's going on, everybody? So, last week I asked a question to everybody, and I kind of thought it was a question where all of the responses would be kind of the same. And the question was, are you more into collecting iconic cards, or are you more drawn toward rare cards? Is it rare or is iconic that really gets you interested, gets you really fired up about picking up a card in your collection? And what I kind of expected was most people would say both. Most people would say that they like cards that are rare and that are iconic. And, for a certain extent, I don't blame people for that. But the responses that I got were kind of all over the place. And I thought that there were a lot of good points that people brought up. And that's what we're going to be talking about today, is your responses, but more specifically, the reasoning behind the responses. When people said something, why did they say it? And the reasoning behind it. Because whenever there's a discussion, right? Whenever there's a discussion, the fun thing is hearing alternative views, not your own view, but the view that somebody else has that's not the same as yours. And hearing their perspective and potentially it adjusting or impacting your opinion on a topic like this. We're all collectors, so otherwise we're probably not that interested in this channel, and we're probably not watching this video. So we all probably think, oh, well, I collect iconic cards, or I collect rare cards, or I collect whatever it is that we collect. So that's our topic today. Now, just a reminder, if you have not yet submitted your favorite pickup from the month of May, down below in the description, I have a link to the Google form where you can upload a picture of your favorite May pickup. Tell me a little bit about it, give me your name, and I will feature it on our upcoming Midlife Community Show and Tell episode here in about a week and a half. So get that submission in so that you don't forget, so it can be included. Again, last month we had about 80. My goal is to break that record this month and have even more. Doesn't have to be an expensive pickup, doesn't have to be a rare pickup. It just has to be your favorite pickup for your collection. So don't forget to do that. So let's go ahead and take a look at the responses that some of you submitted for this week's question. I have both rare and iconic cards in my collection. However, I am not drawn to either. I collect specific teams and players with defined collection scopes, so it is inevitable that I will want cards that others consider rare and iconic. Both drive up value and therefore are an obstacle to collecting. Another comment says, for me, it's neither. Cards that are rare or iconic are great, but they, more often than not, are also expensive. So one of the answers I was not expecting, one of the answers I was not really thinking would show up, but showed up twice, was the answer of neither. I'm not into iconic cards, Greg. I'm not into rare cards. And at first when I read them, I was like, huh. But then the more I thought about it, and in listening specifically to the response of the first of the responses that I just read, is that actually makes sense. Let's say that you're a Dodgers fan. Let's say that for whatever reason, Brooklyn Dodgers, LA Dodgers, that's your team. You grew up as a Dodger fan. Your grandpa was a Dodger fan and kind of told you stories or whatever. Okay. And you just want to collect all the Dodger cards from the 1950s. Now, if that's the case, that's going to be really, really expensive, right? Now, you think of Dodgers cards from the 1950s and, the 52 Topps Jackie Robinson has become one of his key cards, one of his most iconic cards. It's become a really expensive card. Now, it's not as expensive as his Leaf rookie card yet, but it's not that far behind. I mean, think about that. It's starting to catch up to his Leaf rookie card because it's such an iconic card. But you just want to have the team sets from the 1950s of all the Dodgers. But because that card has gotten so expensive, it's become borderline hard to afford or completely unaffordable for some of us. Here's another example. You want mid 50s, we'll say, Dodgers cards, and you want to collect Bowman. And you go, oh, well, the 53 Bowman has one of the most iconic sought-after cards, which is the 53 Bowman color Pee Wee Reese. That card has become very, very popular. You know, it's really one of the first action shots. It's just a sought-after card because it is a cool-looking card. And I know that there are a lot of people who have mixed feelings about it, but a lot of people love the card, and I get it. And as a result, it's really expensive. And Pee Wee Reese was a very good player. But the price of that card is much higher than it otherwise would potentially be because it's such a recognizable card and because it's such an iconic card. So having a card become iconic makes it more expensive, even if you're not wanting it because it's iconic. You're just wanting it because you're a team collector or you're a set builder. I think that that's a really interesting concept that honestly had never crossed my mind. You know, a rare card to find in good condition. There are certain high numbers that are really expensive, partly because of the card, but also partly because of the rarity of the card. You know, one that was mentioned recently is the 52 Topps Eddie Mathews. And it's Eddie Mathews' rookie card. It's from the 52 set. And it's a high number, and it's the last card in the set. It's like where all things that become expensive meet. They all meet at that point for that card. So if you're wanting to put together some team sets from the Braves, that would be an insanely expensive card because it's iconic and it's rare. And I just hadn't put myself in that perspective, probably because I'm not really a team card collector or a set builder. I'm more of an individual card, you know, certain players, certain cards. So because I've never really looked at things from that perspective. But I could totally understand why somebody would be kind of irritated that rare cards are super expensive and that iconic cards become iconic, making them super expensive, which prevents them or makes it difficult for them to achieve their collecting goals of finishing a team set or finishing a complete set. Makes sense, but had never, ever considered it. Let's look at the second type of response that I got. I tend to lean towards iconic cards. When I was a kid looking through a Beckett every month, I would see pictures of cards that were well known in the hobby, like the Hank Aaron rookie, the Michael Jordan rookie, the Koufax rookie, etc. Cards that every kid dreamed of getting, and even now stand out in the minds of collectors as must-haves across all sports. Even though they were unattainable at that point when I was a kid, and some maybe still are, it is awesome to save and add one of these to the PC, almost like you're completing a lifelong search. So just like looking at them in a magazine years ago, I can look at them in real life and enjoy them. Rare cards are cool to look at, but honestly, most are just too expensive due to their rarity. Another comment says, I am much more interested in the iconic cards since I am mostly into collecting rookie cards of Hall of Famers. I do like looking at some of the more rare cards, but for collecting, I prefer to have the best and most valuable card of each player that I can afford. And finally, another comment that points to iconic cards says, here are my thoughts on rarer versus iconic cards. If we look back at the YouTube Hall of Fame results, one observation that stood out to me is some of the rarer cards didn't do as well in the voting. Like the Satchel Paige had the most votes. But I don't know if it was a rarer card, but still a great and iconic popular post-war card too. The Menko Sadahara O was in the bottom 5. The Cal Ripken Jr. 1980 Charlotte O's, which I think there are less than 40 or so of them in existence. The Roberto Clemente 3D and Toleteros Josh Gibson, none of which made the top 10. Most collectors know, or will find out, the rare cards don't come around often. But also, price is another issue as well. Not just rare pre-war and vintage, but some of the ultra-moderns are very expensive too. Mantles, Jackies, Aaron's, Mays, Clemente can be expensive also, but are more accessible while still having demand. I just collect the cards I want to collect, what I enjoy. There are certain cards which are iconic, like the Sandy Koufax rookie. If I ever get one of it, would be most likely in a 4. But I would be happy to have the card, even if it's not that rare. Great video and question. Thanks, Greg. All right. So I thought there were a couple of things in here that really kind of made my wheels turn, and in a good way. You know, the first thing that was mentioned was about looking in the Beckett and the cards that were in the price guide with each set. So I was like, oh yeah, I do remember that. So I pulled out an old Beckett. This Beckett is from August of 1986, and we've got the goat on there. And when we look at it, what we're referring to is in the price guide, so you could kind of see what the cards look like. There was always a card that went along with it. And you can see there the 1950 Bowman Casey Stengel, the 51 Bowman Mickey Mantle. And that is, for a lot of us, I mean, this is pre-internet, right? You didn't know what a lot of cards looked like unless you went to card shows and saw the card. It was difficult to research this. That's why some of these old books that had pictures of all the cards were so important, so you could see what the card looked like, see which card you actually like. And some of those cards became iconic because this is where we saw them and recognized them and started to develop a like for the card. You know, this in 1986, while we're here, I figured I'd look. That 1951 Bowman Mickey Mantle, number 253. It has an up arrow this month in August of 1986. $550 for the Mickey Mantle rookie card in August of 1986. Unbelievable. But it's interesting to me because I think that that's such a great point, is cards that we remember seeing at a young age. Those cards became iconic. You know, you would see a 54 Topps Hank Aaron, and you kind of remember it. You kind of can visualize it. Most of those cards, and think about it this way. Most cards, if I were to say the card, you know, like the 54 Topps Hank Aaron, can you visualize what the card looks like? Can you see it in your mind? Now, some cards, like the 52 Topps Mickey Mantle, we probably all could. Some other cards, like maybe a 58 Topps Roger Maris rookie card, a lot of us could. And then there are other cards that maybe much fewer of us could recognize just by thinking about it. The more recognizable that card is kind of the more iconic, right? The iconic is the memorable card. It's the card we know of. It's the card we're aware of. It's the card that a lot of us want to acquire. And I thought that the use of the Beckett and the pictures from the Beckett were a great example of why some cards become iconic in our mind. Now, the last comment I think is also fantastic. He uses the YouTube Sports Card Hall of Fame, which we just did, or Baseball Card Hall of Fame, I should say, that, we just wrapped up the voting on, and we've talked a little bit about, and we did a little preview of, and we had Ray from Philly on. And when you look at the cards that got in versus the cards that didn't get in a lot of cases, it was not the most valuable cards that got in. It was, in a lot of cases, some of the most recognizable cards that got in. I mean, the Walter Johnson T206 card, the portrait, that got in, but the Walter Johnson rookie card didn't get in. And that's kind of an interesting example and phenomenon where you go, wait a second. His rookie card didn't get in, and it was on the ballot, but his T206 card got in, which was also on the ballot. Why wouldn't his rookie card get in? And for a lot of people, the T206 is a more recognizable card. And because it's more recognizable, people are more likely to vote for it. And the card that is more recognizable tends to be the card that's the most iconic. Because again, when we think of iconic, we think of recognizable. We think of, we all know about the card. We're all aware of the card. We all probably want many of those cards. So I thought that was a great example. And when you look at the cards that were on the YouTube Baseball Card Hall of Fame ballot and the cards that got in and the cards that didn't get in, and he even cites the Menko Sadahara O card. And I think that's a fantastic example as well. It's not a card that many of us, very few people can close their eyes and see that card. And it's not surprising that it finished very, very low in the voting. But a card that is extremely recognizable is the card that did get in. So, very great comments, in my opinion. Now, I don't think it necessarily answers the question for what we should be doing. Should we be collecting iconic? Should we be collecting rare? Should we be collecting neither? Should we be collecting both? All of that is preference. All of that really, again, this is not to suggest what people should be collecting. This is what are you as a collector, what are you drawn towards? Are you drawn toward the card that is very recognizable, or are you drawn to the card that's very rare? And there are some people in this community that are really drawn. The rarer the card, the more they want it. And that makes perfect sense too. It's cool to have things that there are very few examples of. But being drawn toward iconic, I think one of the key things is the nostalgia. When we think about why do we even collect cards, there's a lot of reasons. But one of the main reasons that we all collect cards is because it makes us nostalgic. It makes us feel young again. It brings us back to a time where we remember seeing a card, we remember wanting a card. I mean, heck, I have a 1986 Donruss rated rookie Jose Canseco. And I will never sell it. I will always have that card in my collection. And it's not worth a ton. It's not rare at all. It's not rare at all. But it's extremely iconic to people in their 40s who grew up in the 1980s. It is so iconic. And so, of course, I have to have that card in my collection. That's a perfect example of a card that's iconic but not rare. And why do I even want it? I'm not an A's fan. I'm not a Jose Canseco guy. But I really love having that card because it takes me to a time when I wanted it, but I couldn't have it, and now I can. It takes me back to when I was a kid and he was getting the 40-40 and he was, getting going to the World Series and hitting these mammoth home runs. A lot of iconic cards, they bring us some nostalgia. And that nostalgia is worth a lot to a lot of us. Darren from Return to Collecting says, for next week, I collect both rare and iconic cards. I was more iconic historically, but moving to rare. Ideally, I'd like to buy the rare iconic cards, but I need Petty's bankroll for that. I think the rare cards are very interesting and fun to learn about. The iconic cards are just so cool to look at in the collection. Great question. Finally, Adam from Splendid Sports says, I love collecting both iconic and rare cards equally. I wouldn't want to have to collect one or the other. I think they complement each other in a collection. It's fun to collect iconic cards that everyone recognizes, even some not in the hobby. But it's also fun to have cards that only very few others have, too. Love this topic. Now, these two comments are from two of my favorite guys in the hobby. I absolutely love Darren from Return to Collecting. I absolutely love Adam from Splendid Sports. Both are great guys and both have incredible collections. And it's fun to see what other people that you really admire in the hobby and you really relate to in the hobby and you're friends with in the hobby, seeing what they collect. And both of them have some unbelievable stuff. And it's interesting that both of them said, well, I like both. I like cards that are iconic, but it's kind of nice when they're rare as well. And that is kind of the sweet spot. Now, it's also an expensive spot. Both of them have pretty valuable and expensive collections. And one of the reasons that their collections are expensive and valuable is because a lot of the cards in their collections are both iconic and rare. Now, don't get me wrong. They both also collect a lot of cards that are rare but not particularly iconic, and vice versa. But they've got great collections, and a lot of that is iconic cards that are also rare. You know, I love meeting people in this hobby, and I love seeing their input and seeing their opinions because it does affect mine. Now, does that make them influencers? Does that make me an influencer? I certainly don't think that anybody who's not intending to influence your opinion is an influencer. I think that what a lot of us do is we just share our passion for something. You know, Adam from Splendid Sports has an insane Mickey Mantle collection. And if you haven't checked out his videos on his Mickey Mantle collection, you should check them out. He has some beautiful Mantle cards, an unbelievable Mantle collection. You know, and Darren has been buying a lot of Gehrigs and a lot of DiMaggios in the last year, some Jackie Robinsons, and they're unbelievable as well. And when they're showing those cards, they're not showing them. I can tell you, I know these guys. They're not showing. When Darren shows his 1950 Jackie Robinson, he's not showing his 1950 Jackie Robinson because he's trying to get you to want it. He's not trying to get you to go out and buy it. He's just so excited about his. And he's so excited to own it and share it. And I love seeing it. That sometimes the excitement that is just dripping off of them is contagious. You know, when I see how excited Adam gets as he's showing some of his 90s inserts of Pedro Martinez, it doesn't make me want Pedro Martinez cards, because Pedro Martinez was, you know, the arch nemesis to the Clemens dynasty. But what it does make me do is it does make me more curious and interested in 90s insert cards. And if you're a Red Sox fan or you're a Pedro fan, there's no doubt that some of the cards he shows, you got to sit there and say, those are awesome. I want one of those. So rare and iconic, that's kind of, again, like where I started. That's kind of what I thought everybody would say. I thought everyone would say, well, Greg, it's both. I want cards that are rare and are iconic. I was not expecting anybody to say, neither. I don't like rare or iconic cards. I'm not drawn to either one. I was not expecting that. And a couple of people, that was their response. And some people seem much more drawn by iconic. And that's another thing I like about Darren's comment. Darren says, well, for a while I was drawn to iconic cards. But as time has gone on, I'm now being more and more drawn toward rare cards. And in my discussions and in my videos that I've done with Darren, because we do a lot of collaboration stuff because we're friends, I have found myself learning how his collection has evolved. And it went from a lot of iconic cards like a Roberto Clemente rookie and a Hank Aaron rookie and a Nolan Ryan rookie to now some of the things that he's really after are also cards that don't come up for sale very often. You could go get a Hank Aaron rookie card right now. But some of the cards that I know Darren is on the hunt for are not as accessible as that card. So that's another piece of this that I think everybody has to be open to, is don't feel stuck. If you are in a place right now where you have been collecting iconic cards, but you're kind of getting this itch to buy some rarer stuff, don't feel like you have to stick with the iconic stuff. It's okay to transition over to rare cards. And if you've always been into super rare stuff and now you want to move into some of the iconic stuff, that's okay too. If you've been a set collector and now you want to get into singles, or if you've been into singles and now you want to put together a project of building a set, that is also okay. That's the beauty of this whole thing, is it's a living, it's a living collection which is going to change along the way, just like we do. We change along as the years pass by, and our preferences, our friends, our things that we like to do, our hobbies are always changing as well. So don't feel like you can't change your mind. If you've been only a Brooklyn Dodger card collector and now you want to start also collecting, Yogi Berra cards, do it. Do it. You're the only one preventing you from moving in that direction. I think that was a really interesting conversation. And one of the most interesting parts is the thing we haven't talked about yet, which is I don't think anybody, unless I missed it, I don't think anybody said rare cards are their passion. Now, I know there are some rare card collectors because I see their YouTube channels. But of the responses that I got, of the responses that came in over the last week, I didn't see any response where the person said, I'm all about the rare cards. That's really interesting. If a lot of people said iconic cards and a lot of people said both, and a lot of people said, or at least a couple people said neither, but I didn't have one response that said, my passion is the rare card. Again, it doesn't mean that there aren't rare card collectors out there, because I'm friends with some of them, so I know they are out there. But I thought it was super interesting that never really came up. Now, for this coming week's question, this is one I've always been really, really interested in, because I certainly have a preference. Are you more into portrait pictures on cards of players or action shots of cards and the pictures of the players on the card? Now, when I say action shot, it doesn't necessarily have to be an in-game action shot like a 71 Nolan Ryan with Nolan Ryan on the mound. It could just be, a posed kind of throwing shot or a posed batting shot or something like that, like the 57 Topps Mickey Mantle where he's, finished his swing? Or are you more into the portrait where it's a shot of just the player, specifically like their face, like a 58 Topps Hank Aaron or a 58 Topps Eddie Mathews? Where is your preference? Now, the other thing that I suppose is a potential answer is both. Two of the most beloved sets from the 50s are the 55 and 56 Topps sets. And those cards have both. They have a portrait shot and they have an action shot in a one. And maybe that's the reason that the 55 and 56 sets are so popular. Is that the reason? But again, my question for you is, what do you prefer? Do you prefer the portrait shots of players, or do you prefer the action shots of players? When you're thinking about cards that you want and you want to have in your collection, or you have in your collection, or you're looking to expand your collection, and you think about those cards that you're like, oh man, I really like that card. Do the cards tend to be the action shots, or do the cards tend to be the portrait shots? I think it's a super interesting topic to see where our preferences are when it comes to the image on the card itself. I look forward to hearing what you all think about that topic, and if your preference is portrait or action. Again, if you have not yet submitted your favorite pickup from the month of May, down below in the description, go on down there. There's going to be a link to a Google document, a Google form, and it's going to ask you a couple of quick questions and have a spot for you to upload an image of your favorite pickup. I'm looking forward to seeing all of the pickups that everyone has. It's one of my favorite videos of the month. So if you've not yet submitted yours, I hope you'll do it today.